Almost 2 years ago, I released a video titled The Dominance of FromSoftware, in which I went over why they've had such massive success over the past 15 years, while also influencing the entire gaming landscape in a pretty major way. The too long didn't watch version of that video is FromSoft has been making games for a very long time, and as a result of their unwavering diligence and commitment to their vision of a game, they managed to pioneer a new gaming subgenre that brought them into the limelight, after years and years of having a somewhat smaller audience. I concluded that video with this statement: I know that FromSoft will mess up at some point, releasing a bad game, becoming greedy, or just generally being a bad company. But until then, I will place my trust in them to deliver what's most important to me, a great gaming experience. Surely they wouldn't announce a weird experimental game later down the line that could potentially tarnish this reputation they have built and disappoint the fans that place this kind of faith in them? Right? What? Huh? Wait, an Elden Ring standalone? Wait, what? Elden Ring Nightreign? Pretty much everyone who watched this announcement was, let's call it, confused. FromSoftware said that they were done with Elden Ring after its Shadow of the Erdtree expansion came out. So what the hell was this new game or expansion that also carried the same Elden Ring branding? However, it wouldn't take too long till we found out through interviews and articles explaining what we were actually looking at here. According to Bandai Namco, the world of Elden Ring is getting a standalone multiplayer co-op action survival game that challenges players to band together in order to defeat the Night Lord. Teaming up in squads of 3 or daring to go solo, they must outlast a 3-day and night cycle. With someone other than Miyazaki leading the charge on this project and the absolutely crazy jump into uncharted territory for the studio, not exactly everyone was excited for this new game. Many people were actually very skeptical and were starting to call Nightreign FromSoft's first big miss after all this time. So let's actually have a look at this bizarre product and whether or not releasing it was detrimental to their reputation. I have compiled a list of the most common complaints that people have about it, and let's compare them to how it's been generally received 2 months after launch, in order to determine whether or not this game was indeed too much of a gamble. While many of their games have had multiplayer features present, this one is very different. FromSoft specifically wanted to create a multiplayer-focused experience, directly citing mods like the Elden Ring Seamless Co-op as inspiration for this decision. I was very much on board with this idea and actually have been waiting for something like this for a while now, but many others were rather put off since they prefer to play solo. And even when looking past whatever your preference might be, it is a known fact that FromSoft isn't exactly amazing at the whole netcode thing, so much so that it's become a thing that people love to joke about. When we first got our hands on Nightreign during its network test period, it looked like the unstable multiplayer curse was going to haunt us this time around as well, and I got to painfully experience it firsthand. Well, I guess, yeah, we just run there's probably going to be a lot of people that are just going to run the main character here. Or the one you spawn in with. Oh. I'm gonna just, I'm gonna act like I don't want to get in anyways. That's usually how we did it back in the day. Like a cartridge wasn't really working. You're like, I don't want to play it anyways. It's not like I want to play the game or it. We got like a good 8 minutes of playtime or something. Hey, that's not, it worked. But luckily, when the game actually released, it seemed like they were able to upgrade their servers in a way so that day one players didn't have to look at the login screen for multiple hours before finally getting to play. But I wouldn't exactly count this as a win for them, but more so as doing the bare minimum. As discussion around the multiplayer in this game started to ramp up online, 2 major complaints stuck out as being real pain points for the community. It was mentioned in interviews that there won't be a dedicated 2-player co-op mode. You could either play solo, or more ideally, as a 3-man squad, since the game would be mainly balanced around that configuration. This left many people in a rather awkward position of having to find a third random to join, or simply having to play the potentially more unbalanced solo mode. This is a real oversight by FromSoft, and it seemed like they themselves agreed, because a little after Nightreign release, they announced that they saw the demand for it and were going to add in 2-player co-op with an update later down the line. And the second feature that was seemingly completely overlooked was communications for teams that get put together through the matchmaking system, which is almost mandatory for many people, like I've just explained. Communication while you're in an expedition can only really happen through markers that you can put down on the map. For pre-made groups of players, this obviously wasn't going to be an issue since they can use a way to properly communicate outside of the game, but everyone else has a high likelihood of not being able to coordinate the team and potentially losing the game as a result. But while these multiplayer-related concerns were definitely a huge contributing factor towards the turmoil around Nightreign, there was something else that made people even more upset. From the moment the initial reveal trailer dropped, it was very apparent that this game was going to have a much heavier reuse of assets than any previous FromSoftware title. Even Elden Ring itself caught some flack after its release for reusing stuff like door opening animations, among a few other things. But this one was truly on another level. Firstly, Nightreign decides to make use of 6 beloved and very recognizable bosses from previous Dark Souls games, possibly in an attempt to lure in longtime fans with a few familiar faces they've come to love over the past decade. However, some work has gone into updating these older bosses with some new moves to better fit into the framework of the newer generation Souls-like combat. Beyond these, almost every weapon and enemy or boss you can find in this game are just straight up lifted from Elden Ring itself. Whether or not they simply tried to cut down development costs for new assets or they served a completely different purpose, it didn't change the outcome of how this would be received by the players. It came across as cheap, lazy, and pandering to longtime fans for nostalgia's sake. Seeing the initial excited reaction to the reveal that the Nameless King was going to be a boss you could fight in the brand new experience was quickly turned into questioning if Nightreign was simply supposed to be a quick cash grab rather than a quality game that we've come to expect from this developer. It turns out that the only real new assets you can find in this game are things like the roster of characters that you get to play as well as the so-called Night Lord bosses. On paper, this looks pretty bad, but to give credit where credit's due, the bosses are some of the coolest ones we've seen from them to date, and the Nightfarers are also another highlight of the game. All of them feel very unique in playstyle and fit perfectly with the very fast-paced and frantic expeditions in Limveld. And speaking of which, I think it's time to go a little bit more in-depth with those. After Nightreign released and the reviews were still very mixed, I saw a lot of people complaining that the game simply wasn't what they were expecting. Some seemed to think that this would be another expansion to Elden Ring in the vein of Shadow of the Erdtree, and others simply didn't expect it to be all that different to its namesake. While FromSoft was very clear that Nightreign would be its own separate thing, you can't really blame the average player for having the wrong idea about this product, with the way they've decided to attach the brand of their most successful game to date and all. Many adjustments have been made to the core gameplay of Elden Ring to better adapt it to this new fast-paced nature of Nightreign's roguelike expeditions. The player character has vastly improved movement capabilities, such as faster running, vaulting over ledges, and complete immunity to fall damage, while you also aren't able to summon any kind of mount to traverse the map. Interactions in the world, such as looting chests, activating Sites of Grace, or even leveling up, have also received a major overhaul, speeding up the flow of gameplay substantially. Time is of essence in this game, and they made sure to remove as much friction as possible outside of the combat, and a lot of players didn't really like that. It all felt too different, too bizarre to be connected to the Elden Ring property, and I haven't even mentioned the Fortnite-esque storm that's used as the time-gating mechanic yet, which is especially funny when remembering the absolutely classic message copypasta of Fortnite. You know, maybe that's even where they got the idea from. But you also get these pre-made characters that you can't even build yourself properly, and you have these hero-like abilities, and you got that relic system which makes this game a roguelite, and the list of things goes on and on, leading players to think that FromSoft has strayed too far from the source material, and it simply isn't fun to play anymore. Or is it? I believe in us.
This guy stands on business. I don't really want to mess with this guy.
Nope, I do not believe in us. Elden Ring Nightreign originally released to a fairly mixed reception on Steam, while also pulling in hundreds of thousands of people on day one. The issues I just mentioned made up a majority of the negative reviews and seemed to indicate that this game might have actually been received pretty poorly when compared to anything else that FromSoft has put out in the last 15 years. But over time, that mixed rating on Steam slowly started to climb up to mostly positive, and as of writing this video, even way past the very positive 80% threshold. So, how did this happen? Why did the sentiment around Nightreign shift so much only after a couple of weeks since its release? Did they maybe fix all of the issues people had? No. No, they did not. That's obviously not possible in this case. But I believe that this shift can be traced down to the players getting a better understanding of what this game truly is. It's a weird side project that doesn't really capture a lot of what made the Souls games special to many people, so those who were seeking another experience like that were left sorely disappointed. But in my opinion, this was the wrong way to look at it from the very start. Nightreign doesn't really try to capture a lot of what made the Souls game special to those people, because it is something completely different. It was made by a small internal team, using leftover ideas that didn't fit anywhere else, but to serve as a grand experiment outside of FromSoftware's usual big, single-player focused mainline releases. You can very easily skip this game if it doesn't look appealing to you, and I believe that that is what has happened after this game's release. Those who didn't like it left, but those who did stuck around and eventually brought up the review scores. Does this mean that FromSoftware has lost some of its reputation? To some, it probably has, but to me, I think we'll have to wait for their next big project before we can pass on any further judgment. When I called Nightreign a grand experiment, what I really meant by that was this. I strongly believe this to be a test run for the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive PvPvE extraction type game named The Duskbloods. And here it clicked for me. I was like, it's the Lies of P DLC. No, they're not gonna announce Bloodborne 2 or like a Bloodborne whatever thing on a Nintendo Direct. No. I'm just kind of crazy at this point, you know. I just, you know, there's no way. That's right, I think that all of this is simply an elaborate scheme by FromSoft to get their player base to open up to something new and experimental. Forged out of the remnants of their biggest game ever, Nightreign is supposed to open up a new door for the studio to grow creatively, and I actually believe that this is a good thing. We shouldn't force them to make only one type of game. See what happened to Ubisoft or Bethesda. They have become a laughingstock for refusing to deviate from their old ways, continuing to produce the same type of experiences over and over again. At a time where innovation in this medium we so dearly love is mostly pushed by smaller studios or even indie developers, we could use a big player in the industry to step up and create some weird games that might not sell millions of copies, but are genuine efforts to build new and exciting worlds. And who better to do that than the studio that has already done it before? Nightreign might not be exactly what I just described, but I am hopeful that this is going to have a positive effect for us later down the line. I will be very surprised if this marks a complete shift in focus for FromSoftware, but we will definitely see a greater variety of games come out of the studio. At the end of the day, I had a blast playing Nightreign, and I will most likely hop on with the boys every now and then to get my quick fix of some fast-paced Souls-like action. And I know that many others will do the same. I think I said it best in that other video of mine that I mentioned at the start of this one. I know that FromSoft will mess up at some point. Releasing a bad game, becoming greedy, or just generally being a bad company. But until then, I will place my trust in them to deliver what's most important to me, a great gaming experience.